But we want to turn here to the issue that is obviously, I think, just hanging over every single person in the world, COVID-19, the progress of vaccines, the issue of vaccine apartheid. And we are very, very honored to be joined as we continue the show by Kambale Musavuli, who is an activist, a writer, and an analyst with the Center for Research on the Congo-Kinshasa. Kambale, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, thank you. I'm glad to see everyone safe. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of us in person.
Yes, absolutely. I am very much looking to that when we can travel again and exchange. You know, Kambale, this phrase vaccine apartheid has, it's become a big phrase now. A lot of people are talking about it, and there's many ways to look at it and talk about it, but it feels so appropriate to me first and foremost because it feels as if Africa, more so than, especially sub-Saharan Africa, almost more so than anywhere else in the world, is getting the short end of the stick as it concerns the vaccination issue.
Indeed. I mean, there are a few contradictions on the African continent. One, COVID-19 took everybody by surprise, especially on the African continent. We have a challenge on the African continent where the perception of COVID is that it's not real. Is quite present with people. I mean, there is a history of that. I may make the comparison. If you talk to descendants of the Tuskegees and you ask them about any vaccine today, would they want to take vaccine? Now, there is a reason why people are worried about vaccine because of the different syphilis vaccine tests that the US has done on people and so on. On the African continent, if you look at the DRC, research has shown that for HIV, some of the infection of HIV came from polio vaccine. So there is this disinformation about what Africa needs. So as we were first taken by shock by COVID, it wasn't the poor who brought COVID on the African continent. I mean, somebody had to get on the plane, very privileged to get in on the African continent. And as it arrived, many countries on the African continent did not have the pharmaceutical facilities or medical facilities to be able to care for the COVID uprising within the country. So in DRC, for example, we didn't have more than 100 ventilators in the entire country. We're a country of 81 million people, right?
Wow.
Then you have the religious right. The religious right in the United States is quite connected on the African continent. I'm in Accra here, and I can tell you that at 5 a.m., many of the TV stations here will start playing not Ghanaian pastors, they will start playing American pastors, and some of them from Texas, right? On the regular basis. As when you watch now the content that's being put, you hear the same conspiracy theories that you hear in the United States. The mark of the 666, if you get the vaccine, you should not take it, and so on. But the ordinary individual who's going about his life or her life, trying to change the conditions of their people, may not understand all the dynamic, right? So most people are not inclined to take the vaccine. Let's use the case of the Congo. This is a news that came out 2 days ago. The DRC received for the COVAX project of providing the AstraZeneca in African countries. They received 1.7 million vaccine. We are a country of 81 million people. 2 days ago, it is announced that UNICEF is going to take 1.3 million of those vaccines away from the DRC to avoid expiration. Can you imagine that we actually receive? People are not taking, the government does not have the capacity to distribute it. And plus, there is no education on why it's important. So that's one level to first understand the context of how people are perceiving vaccine, if it's necessary or not. We know that from the West, at least what I've been sharing with people on the ground is, the West is not interested in pushing vaccine on African people. They are actually holding on to themselves. Right? They don't want to release the intellectual property, the Pfizer and Moderna. They want to keep it to themselves. So there is no push to force Africans to take it. But there is this misinformation going on across the African continent around that. But the second part, which I find hopeful, while we may not have access to the vaccine and so on, Africans have understood, in some of the countries, have figured out a way to deal with the COVID situation. So I can give you an example. In February of last year, when the COVID hit, you remember there was this whole discussion around you need to have this N95 mask.
Right.
People have to wear N95 masks. Countries have been shut down. How will an African get an N95 mask? It was nowhere to be found. But in February already of 2020, Africans were making the masks. There were masks here in Ghana that was being provided by communities where before even the WHO said that you could use different fabric with, I think, 2 to 3 layers to protect yourself. People were already doing that. That's one aspect that I found the ingenuity of the people to address their own issues. The other, there have been people who have worked on using traditional medicine to help themselves. What is the context of that, right? You don't have access to vaccine. There are not adequate medical facilities. We understand what the virus is. We know that we need to boost our immune system. We have to clean our hands and so on. So people have already started using boosters, vitamin C boosters that they will use for themselves. Have there been enough studies to prove that this has worked against COVID? Not enough, right? But people on the ground have used traditional herbal medicine to treat themselves. And for some reasons, and that's what all the scientists are asking themselves, with the lack of medical facilities, lack of access to vaccine, and the West literally blocking the intellectual property so that Africans can produce the vaccine locally, we don't have the same level of deaths that we see in other parts of the world. South Africa was hit the most. I do believe people are dying. I mean, in Ghana, we've seen it. People in our circles, their family members have lost their lives, unfortunately, with COVID. So we know it's real. We know government officials have gotten it. Just a side note, one of the young activists that we work with here in Ghana, she's a nurse. She shared with us during one of the trainings we were doing how it's quite fascinating that some of the pastors who have been preaching to their members about not taking the vaccine or praying their way, she saw them taking the vaccine when he arrived in Ghana, in her hospital, right? So, wow. But yet they're preaching. So she shared this type of context. But then it's still challenging for the African continent. I'll end by adding the situation also of the vaccine, the AstraZeneca vaccine, particularly what's happening in Ghana. They received the first batch of the AstraZeneca. All of them were used, right? People have been vaccinated. It wasn't enough. I think it wasn't over even 1 million they arrived, but it's all gone. The second dose for most people is this month. There is no second dose here. Why? The manufacturer company does not have it, which is the Indian institute that's been producing in mass the AstraZeneca, and the vaccines that they have produced are being hugged by Western countries. So people have gotten the first dose, but the second dose is not here. Right? So you're finding out all these issues, and the leaders that we work with here in Ghana are clearly stating that the solution beyond the vaccine that we are receiving is for Africans to develop their health capacity, their health infrastructure. This is an opportunity for Africans to do so. But unfortunately, the African leaders are not thinking that way. They're not thinking that this is the appropriate time to now start building a vaccine center here, start building pharmaceutical centers, encouraging local doctors, just like in Nigeria, they've started tests on the vaccine that they are trying. If Cuba can do it, what can't African countries do?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. I mean, Cuba is a country of 11 million people, going to produce 100 million at least of various vaccines. I mean, Rania, it really just reminds me of, in so many ways, it's sort of the impact of imperialism over time and in multiple levels. I mean, you've got, the historical impact, the underdevelopment of nations, and the contemporary impact of the vaccine apartheid that we're seeing.
Yeah, and I want to just point out, high-income countries have purchased more than half of the COVID-19 vaccine supply to date. Low-income countries, just 9%. That's according to Duke University's Global Health Innovation Center. So you have this huge disparity in how many vaccines these different parts of the world have, where you have countries like the US, I think that we have at least twice enough vaccines, or enough vaccines to inoculate the population twice over. For Canada, it's like 5 times the number of vaccines they need. So you have actual hoarding taking place. Rich countries had pre-purchased something like 96% of the doses of Pfizer, for example. 100% of Moderna supply was also purchased by rich nations. I mean, this is hoarding on an epic scale, and it really does highlight not just global inequality, but just the level of the fact that this is happening off of these big pharmaceutical companies. Because these big pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer and Moderna, they're located in the global north. And so you have a situation where these pharmaceutical companies are actually using the governments in which they sit to prevent their vaccines from being more readily available and being made cheaply by preventing the waiving of these patent rights, right? You've got poor countries like Brazil and India and like 100 other countries begging the global north to please force their pharmaceutical companies to waive the patent rights to their vaccines so they can be made cheaply, as Kambale was saying. And the response so far since December has been no from the US, no from the UK, no from the EU. So it really is this in your face, rich countries that are only rich because they stole resources and enslaved people. They literally stole labor and resources from the global south. That's the only reason they're rich and developed, are preventing the pandemic from ending in poor countries. And as a result, we could end up with some new crazy variant that's vaccine resistant, which will be great for Pfizer and Moderna because then they can produce new vaccines that then have to be purchased by governments. And also, I just want to point out that these vaccines were made using money to fund research from the public. Huge amounts of money.
Yeah, I want to bring Juan back in here on a couple of these, talking about the global north, rich people, and the callousness that is out there. Juan and I were chatting about a clip we saw earlier on exactly that note.
Yeah. No, it's actually insane. I want to show the clip and then we could talk about it a little bit.
Please.
So this is an interview with Bill Gates, and they were talking about exactly that, about the patents. And he was literally asked, does he think the patents should be removed so the vaccine can be produced just all over the world and bring the price down? Oh, give me 1 second.
Yeah, we'll get Bill Gates' answer here. I mean, who even made Bill Gates the person who decides that? I mean, the fact that the individual social power of Bill Gates as a capitalist and the philanthropy that he does on global health. I mean, as far as I know, the man has no public health credentials at all. But yet and still,
Bill Gates did.
Here we go.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing with Elon Musk. Elon Musk is now an astronaut, right? Like the rich can do whatever the hell they want. They can do whatever they want.
It's because of what they invest in. It's because Bill Gates has invested huge sums of money in these different pharmaceutical companies that make these vaccines. We know he's been profiting off of jacking up the prices of vaccines that go to Africa. He's been doing this for decades.
Yeah, I want to toss the clip.
So it's not surprising. Yeah.
There's been some speculation that the changing intellectual property rules and allowing these vaccines, as you say, the recipe for these vaccines to be shared would be helpful. Do you think that would be helpful?
No.
Why not?
Well, there's only so many vaccine factories in the world. And
wait, I just want to pause it. Real quick. That certainty, right?
No.
people are very serious about the safety of vaccines. And so moving something that had never been done, moving a vaccine from, say, a J&J factory into a factory in India, that it's novel. It's only because of our grants and our expertise that can happen at all. The thing that's holding things back in this case is not intellectual property. There's not like some idle vaccine factory with regulatory approval that makes magically safe vaccines.
Yes, there is.
Not true. There's multiple.
You got to do the trials on these things, and every manufacturing process has to be looked at in a very careful way. There's all sorts of issues around intellectual property having to do with medicines, but not in terms of how quickly we've been able to ramp up the volume here.
He's a liar.
I mean, there's the level of duplicity there, and so many of the things that were said is unbelievable, Kambale. I mean, the first thing that jumps out at me is that he used India as an example. India is literally the world's largest producer of vaccines, and as we know from our friends in NewsClick, there actually is a giant pharmaceutical factory sitting unused and empty in the southern part of the country. But anything you want to comment regarding Bill Gates is certainly welcome here, Kambale. But just that element of it to me was so unbelievable in terms of just the racism and disrespect towards the global South.
Yeah.
I mean, India does not have the vaccine because they can't use the vaccine that they are producing for the global North. I mean, that's one of the reasons why India is pushing. I mean, I don't think people realize that they're being vaccinated by vaccine manufacturing in India. Because they made vaccines for Canada, they made vaccines for Europe and so on. They have the capacity to do it. I mean, you asked me a very difficult question, right? It's not even a question. You made a statement that I should comment on Bill Gates. Bill Gates is representing something so insidious that we shouldn't look at him as an individual. There are other people like him. We're mentioning, we can talk about the other Bill, the political Bill Clinton. Right? That the people who have the wealth and the power are dictating what should people believe, and people don't have access to the information because they provide platform for them. You will see him on TV. He will sound with this great English that they whoop us at school to speak. And he sounds as a reasonable person. But how can he stand in front of a camera and lie? And there is no repercussion, right? Tomorrow there will not be someone to hold him accountable for lying that India does not have the capacity to provide vaccine or other part of the world. The issue is not the production of vaccine. The issue is that the intellectual property of the vaccine is not provided to the people. And that goes even to the business that he created. He extracted so much surplus value from the knowledge of developers over decades. This guy was not writing code. He was not assembling computers, right? But he has all this wealth from the people. The same thing can be said about Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
We just about a couple of weeks ago, we were watching a documentary done by Al Jazeera about the Amazon factory. And when people in Ghana saw that Amazon workers have a timer to go to the bathroom, that if you do not go back, you will lose your job. People could not believe it. And whenever they say to them, in the documentary, we saw that they say that if Jeff Bezos today give every one of his employees $200,000 bonus, he will still have the same wealth that he had when COVID started. People were blown away, right? So for us, the working class of the world, we have to now understand it's no longer a question of what he has to do. That's why I brought up the ingenuity of the Africans. We didn't wait for WHO to say, now you can wear any mask. All right, it was like, wear the N95 mask. No, we are not going to wait for the N95 masks, right? They're talking about the confinement measures. In some countries, it's impossible, right? Kinshasa alone, the capital city, Kinshasa has 15 million people. You have a choice of being confined or dying of starvation. So you have to move. So people start thinking about ingenious ways of how do we live with this reality where this disease of the rich in the continent of Africa, this is how it's seen. COVID only entered the African continent because of the bourgeoisie and those who have the privilege of traveling to come into the country. That's the only way it got into some of the remote areas in the country. Yeah. So that's how it's being presented to the people. But I'm sorry, but it's really hard to speak frankly on live television about Bill Gates. But I think he should stop speaking, and we should give the platform more to the people who are facing COVID on the ground, who can say this is what's happening to us, and this is how we should regain control. It should not be illegal to have the IP. Who is the WikiLeaks of Pfizer and Moderna? We need these codes. Release it to the masses. Be the person who's going to say that this is the day this will end. It's for humanity.
Absolutely. Well, I was just going to say, if you are that person, Breakthrough News will release that, and we're not afraid, whatever the consequences are. I mean, the stakes are so high. Rania, go ahead.
I just want to say, I think that given what you're saying, Bill Gates is speaking, like you said, not as an individual. He's speaking on behalf of the capitalist class. He's speaking on behalf of the pharmaceutical industry when he says those lies. And I think this has more to do with than just COVID, right? It's that they don't want to establish a precedent. Because once they make for one vaccine, the intellectual property available, once they waive those patent rights, it's almost like maybe they probably fear there's no going back, right? Because if you do it for this one thing, then people might start asking, well, why can't you do it for other vaccines? Why can't you do it for other medical procedures? Why can't we just stop prioritizing profits over people? It might lead down this slippery slope of really questioning this absurd, unequal global order that we have that denies not just COVID vaccines to people, denies HIV treatments to people, right?
Malaria.
Denies malaria vaccines to people. There already is this. It's not just with the COVID vaccine. There already is this entire system of unequal vaccine prices around the world where for just childhood vaccines, there's been studies done on this where, across Africa and Latin America, poorer countries are actually paying higher prices for childhood vaccines than global north countries like France are paying. So there's already inequality embedded in this vaccine system that someone like Bill Gates is deeply invested in. So I think this is also about protecting that extremely unjust and unequal order, right? Because once you set one precedent, it's like, well, why can't everything just be that way?
Yeah. I agree with you 100%. Well, Kambale, I really appreciate you being willing to join us. I know it is a lot later over there where you are in Accra, so thank you so much for giving us some of your time. It was so great to have you here. Very honored.
Thank you, and see you very soon.
Yes, absolutely. Looking forward to it.